Hi, my name is Edward Monroe. A few weeks ago at my own wife's funeral, my daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Don't expect a penny of Mom's $68 million." That was the moment I realized my fight wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, truth, and not letting betrayal have the final word. Don't expect a penny of Mom's $68 million. The words fell like a blade, sharp and deliberate, hurled at me by Olivia, the moment the funeral ended. The room still smelled of lilies and wax, the air heavy with the silence of grief, and yet she chose that moment to strike. My daughter. My blood looked at me, not with sorrow, but with disdain. For an instant I felt the same chill I had years ago, when the boardroom door closed on me after I had tried to block a reckless merger. Back then, men I had trusted pushed me aside, calling me obsolete. That humiliation has never left me, and tonight it returned wrapped in the voice of my own child. The living room of the Monroe estate gleamed with crystal chandeliers, but it was colder than any winter night. Family members stood, scattered, their whispers mixing with the clink of glasses. Some avoided my eyes. Others watched like spectators at a trial, waiting for me to break. Olivia's words gave them permission. She had rehearsed this. Daniel, her husband, slipped beside her, his polished smile betraying nothing of grief. In his hand was a folder thick with papers. He opened it casually, as if showing vacation photos. Draft agreements, he murmured loud enough for cousins and aunts to hear. Proof that Margaret entrusted everything to Olivia. His tone was smooth, the tone of a man used to twisting law into rope. Gasps traveled through the room. A cousin shook his head. An uncle muttered something about propriety. Slowly their weight shifted, bodies leaning closer to Olivia, further from me. It was a tide, turning subtle but undeniable. I remained where I was sitting in the high-backed chair Margaret and I once shared during holidays. My fingers traced the carved wood, steady, unshaken. Anger would have pleased them. Protest would have confirmed their story, that I was bitter, desperate. So I gave them nothing. Olivia's eyes glittered. She was not content with silence. "You were never part of this family's success, Father. Mother built it. I will continue it. You," she paused, ensuring everyone heard, "you are a relic." The words stung, not because they were true, but because they came from her. I saw in her face the girl I had once carried on my shoulders, cheering at her school plays. Now she wielded her tongue like a knife, eager to draw blood in front of the people who shared our name. Daniel added the finishing touch. Edward should take comfort. Margaret ensured he will be comfortable. But decision-making control, that was never his role. He looked around, inviting nods, and nods came. Weak ones at first, then firmer. The tide completed its turn. My heart beat slow and steady. I had lived long enough to know that storms reveal more than they destroy. Every word Olivia spoke, every smirk Daniel allowed himself, every relative who stepped closer to them, they were all writing a record. And I, sitting silent, was writing mine. Her voice rose sharp and merciless. "Look around, everyone. Does this man deserve a single cent of Mom's legacy? He contributed nothing. He lost his place at the company years ago, and now he thinks he can feed on what isn't his." The humiliation was complete. Laughter, nervous but real, broke from the corner of the room. She had managed to reduce me to a symbol, a failed patriarch outlived by his wife's fortune. She believed it. They believed it. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against marble. The room quieted. Olivia folded her arms, triumphant. She thought I would argue, plead, fight barehanded against her performance. But I simply walked toward the balcony doors, ignoring the eyes, ignoring Daniel's smugness. Cool night air met me as I stepped outside. Westchester's trees stood like black sentinels against the pale March moon. I let the silence embrace me. Behind me, voices resumed buzzing like flies over carrion. Let them. I leaned on the railing, exhaling once. The game has just begun. A sealed envelope, its red wax stamp catching the sterile glow of the office light, rested in Olivia's hand, as though it were a weapon. She rose slightly in her chair, savoring the pause before her declaration. "This is Mother's official will," she announced, each syllable clipped, deliberate, triumphant. The room, Daniel's friend's office, reeked of staged authority. Bookshelves lined with untouched legal volumes loomed in the background, their spines too pristine, their dust jackets barely creased. A bowl of polished stones sat on the desk decoration instead of meaning. The air itself felt counterfeit, as though the very oxygen had been arranged to validate their performance. In that hollow theater, Margaret's final gaze resurfaced in my mind. Her voice, faint but steady, had carried a message meant only for me, Edward. When the time comes, the truth will stand clear. I sat back, letting the memory settle like armor on my shoulders. Olivia slit the wax and unfolded the document with exaggerated care. The rustle of paper echoed louder than any whisper of grief. "Mother left everything to me," she declared, sliding the stack across the table. $68 million. Every account, every property, every share. I am the sole heir. Daniel leaned forward smoothly, his cufflinks flashing. "The provisions are backed by several memoranda of intent," he explained, voice dripping with rehearsed legitimacy. "Each is properly dated and notarized. This will is consistent with her established wishes. It is binding." Murmurs spread like a ripple through the relatives packed into the narrow space. A cousin avoided my eyes. An uncle exhaled relief. In their silence, I read a verdict. They had already erased me. The patriarch turned into a footnote. I let their looks graze over me without flinching. "Where is this will stored?" I asked. At last my voice flat my gaze on Daniel. "In which registry? Which firm holds the original?" For the briefest second, Daniel faltered. His jaw shifted, his fingers twitched against the desk. Then he masked it with a smile too polished. "The original," he said vaguely, "is safe. As you know, trusted family members sometimes keep such matters private. This is perfectly normal procedure." His evasion hung in the air like smoke. Olivia, sensing my silence as surrender, reached for his hand. Their fingers laced together in a show of unity, a performance staged for the family's benefit. She straightened her eyes, cutting into mine with venom, sharpened over years. "Father, you are nothing. You never were. And now you have no claim, no voice, no place." Her words slammed into the room heavier than the legal jargon Daniel wielded. No one spoke to correct her. The family simply absorbed the insult, their silence, an endorsement. I remained still, the storm in me muted. Silence, after all, is often mistaken for weakness, but silence in my world is a strategy. The air shifted when the door clicked open. Shoes tapped against marble, the cadence steady and unhurried. A tall man entered, wrapped in a dark coat that carried an aura of finality. Richard Hale, executor of the earlier trust. Margaret's confidant stood in the threshold. Without greeting, without theatrics, he stepped toward me and extended a sealed envelope. It was heavier than paper alone, its presence a counterweight to Olivia's smug display. Every eye in the room tracked its path into my hands. Inside the envelope Richard had placed in my hands, I found handwriting that was unmistakably Margaret's. The strokes of her pen carried weight, not just ink, but intent, her style, precise, each letter, etched with care. For a moment I held my breath, as though the paper itself were her last breath reaching me across the silence of her absence. Her voice replayed in my head, softer than memory, yet louder than any accusation hurled at me in that sterile office. "Edward, if I'm gone, do what you know must be done." It was not a request, it was instruction. A promise disguised as farewell. By the evening of March 23rd, I was in a dim tavern tucked into the shadows of Manhattan. Its wood beams sagged with decades of smoke and secrets, the kind of place where voices sank low and eyes kept to themselves. The clinking of glassware and the soft hum of jazz brushed over us an odd serenity against the storm we were about to unleash. Richard Hale sat across from me, his briefcase open on the table, but turned so that only I could see its contents. He produced a folded sheet, aged handwritten, sealed in a banker's envelope. "This," he said with a measured tone, "is the codicil Margaret signed. She placed it in trust, and I've safeguarded it. It supersedes the so-called will Olivia paraded." The paper smelled faintly of ink and lavender. Margaret's scent lingering as if she had pressed it with her own hands. Her instructions were direct accounts, portioned properties, held protections, secured for me for the family legacy, not seized by greed. Richard's eyes hardened. She knew Olivia and Daniel would attempt something. She foresaw it. Before I could reply, a woman slid quietly into our booth. Evelyn Carter. Margaret's old friend, sharp-eyed, her silver hair tucked behind one ear. She carried a worn leather folder, thinner than Richard's briefcase, but no less formidable. "I couldn't let her words vanish," Evelyn said, opening the folder to reveal printouts and transcripts. "Margaret emailed me 2 months before her passing. She wrote of her fear that Olivia had pressed her to alter the will. And here she tapped a sheet of voicemail. Margaret told me to keep it in case." I scanned the notes. "If Edward ever doubts, give him this. It will show him the truth. I trust him more than anyone." The evidence formed a web stronger than Olivia's stage play. A codicil in Richard's custody, an independent witness in Evelyn, corroborated records no court could ignore. Richard leaned in, voice low. "We can bring this to light now. End it before they move further." But I shook my head, the decision already clear in my chest. No. Let them grow confident. Let them believe the stage belongs to them. When we step forward, their applause will choke in their throats. For a moment, silence enveloped us, broken only by the scrape of Evelyn's glass against the table. She studied me, perhaps surprised at my restraint, perhaps recognizing it for what it was not, hesitation, but design. Richard exhaled slowly. "Very well. But no, this time is not infinite. They will not idle." I sipped my whiskey, the burn sharp, clarifying. "That's precisely the point. The higher they climb in arrogance, the steeper the fall." The conversation drifted into logistics, where the documents were stored, how Evelyn would be prepared as a witness, how the timing of exposure would cut deepest. I listened, contributed, but held back from setting the final move in motion. Patience was the most vicious blade I had. Then, just as I began to feel the weight of quiet resolve settle over us, Richard's phone buzzed on the table. A single notification, its glow spilling into the dim light. He read it, his face tightening, as he turned the screen toward me. The headline was blunt, unvarnished: Olivia Monroe, to sign MOU 20% stake to private equity firm. Olivia's face stared back at me from the glossy cover of Forbes, her smile sharpened into a blade. The headline screamed across the page: "The heiress of $68 million, Olivia Monroe, the future of wealth." Her image, arms crossed, chin lifted, radiated triumph. The world now saw her as untouchable, the sole inheritor, the rising monarch of a dynasty she had not built, but seized. The photo dredged up an older memory, one that cut deeper than I admitted even to myself. Years ago, in the boardroom of the company I had helped found, a young executive had whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Edward is the past. His time is over." That sting never left me. Now, watching Olivia bask in the same arrogance, I understood that the past was not irrelevant. It was the fuse. On April 1st, 2025, the grand ballroom of a five-star hotel in Midtown Manhattan transformed into Olivia's stage. Spotlights glared, cameras rolled, and banners for the private equity firm flanked the stage. Olivia, dressed in ivory silk, signed the memorandum of understanding with a flourish. She shook hands with suited financiers, Daniel guiding her movements like a conductor hidden behind the orchestra. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters surged forward. "Ms. Monroe, how does it feel to take the helm of such a vast fortune? What are your plans for international expansion? Will you redefine the Monroe legacy?" She answered with the ease of someone convinced the world had already been conquered. "This is only the beginning," she said, voice amplified by microphones, eyes glinting with satisfaction. Around her, our relatives cheered and clapped their loyalty, migrating toward power, like moths to flame. Daniel hovered at her side, whispering, angling her for the best shots. He had orchestrated this pageantry perfectly: the bridge loan from the equity firm, the media blitz, the illusion of permanence. Together, they looked untouchable. I stood at the edge of the crowd, silent, blending into the background. Silence had become my shield, my disguise. Let them mistake it for defeat. Every step Olivia climbed only ensured the fall would crush her harder. Meanwhile, Richard Hale moved with precision outside the spotlight. That very morning, he had filed for a temporary restraining order, a TRO backed by Margaret's codicil and Evelyn's testimony. The petition demanded that all assets tied to the estate be frozen until the question of the genuine will was resolved. The filing was airtight. A blade slipped quietly between armor plates. By noon, as Olivia raised champagne with financiers and family alike, the judge signed the order. In one stroke of the pen, the multi-million-dollar agreement she had just celebrated was suspended. The loan she flaunted was void until further notice. Every headline praising her ascension was already a ghost, but Olivia didn't know. Not yet. I watched as she posed for cameras, her laughter echoing across marble floors, the press swallowing her story whole. She had no inkling that lightning had already forked its way toward her. In the photographs taken that day, her smile gleams broad, confident, radiant, a woman unaware that the very stage she stood on had begun to crack beneath her. The gavel struck once, silencing the restless air in the Manhattan courthouse. The room was packed, family members craning for a glimpse, reporters poised with pens, every eye trained on the bench. The judge cleared his throat, voice heavy with the gravity of the moment. "We are here today to address the matter of the last will and testament of Margaret Monroe." A hush fell. I sat calmly at the plaintiff's table, my posture unbent, hands folded. Inside, my pulse was steady, sharpened not by nerves, but by inevitability. I thought of Richard's hand that night in the tavern, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. His eyes had carried a message clearer than words. This will change everything. Today was the moment to open it. Olivia sat opposite me, pristine in a tailored dress, radiating confidence. She looked like a queen, certain of her crown. Beside her, Daniel leaned close, whispering rehearsed reassurances, though the tremor in his jaw betrayed strain. The judge gestured. Counsel present the will in question. Olivia rose with a dramatic flourish. She presented her version, a sealed packet she insisted was Margaret's final testament. Her voice carried a rehearsed strength. "This will leaves the estate in full to me, Olivia Monroe, her daughter. It is clear it is binding, and it is her wish." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. For a moment Olivia's aura held, but Richard was already standing. He placed a heavy file on the clerk's desk, his tone clipped, but calm. "Your Honor, we submit into evidence the codicil and authenticated documents recovered from the bank's safety deposit box. These were signed and sealed by Margaret Monroe, witnessed and notarized. This is the true and final testament." Gasps echoed. The judge leaned forward, scrutinizing the seal and the notarization. He motioned for it to be read aloud. Richard's voice carried through the courtroom as he unfolded the document. "I hereby appoint my husband, Edward Monroe, as executor of my estate. Distribution of assets shall follow the provisions herein, ensuring fairness and protection of legacy." The words landed like stones in water, sending ripples of disbelief through the crowd. Evelyn Carter then stepped forward, her presence steady and unshaken. She held a stack of emails, her voice strong. "Margaret confided in me. She feared coercion. These emails, dated and preserved, show her intent to secure Edward's role. I also provide a voicemail she left explicitly naming him as the rightful steward." The judge listened intently as the audio was played. Margaret's voice filled the room, frail, yet resolute. "If this reaches the court, know that Edward is the one I trust. He will do what is right." Olivia's mask faltered, a flicker of panic breaking across her polished composure. Daniel's hand twitched, fingers tightening against the table. Finally, a handwriting expert testified. With meticulous precision, he compared Margaret's signatures across decades with the ones on both documents. His verdict was crisp, undeniable. The document Ms. Olivia Monroe submitted is inconsistent with Margaret Monroe's authenticated handwriting. The document presented by Mr. Edward Monroe is genuine. The climax unfolded in silence, broken only by the judge's voice. "The court hereby rejects the falsified will. The true testament is recognized. Edward Monroe is affirmed as the legal executor of the estate." A wave of sound erupted. Gasps, whispers, even the shuffling of reporters desperate to file the headline first. And then came Olivia's scream. "No." She shot to her feet, fury twisting her face, the glamorous mask ripped away. Daniel's complexion drained to gray, his lips pressed tight, a man cornered by exposure. At the bench, the judge's gavel fell. "Order, order, in this court." But already prosecutors in the gallery were scribbling notes, one of them signaling quietly to a clerk. Ethical violations, fraud, perjury charges would follow. The house of cards was collapsing. I remained seated, breathing evenly. For the first time, I felt the weight begin to shift, not entirely, not finally, but unmistakably. Justice was no longer distant. It had stepped into the room. The courtroom was still vibrating from Olivia's outburst when I rose to my feet. My voice carried not anger, but gravity, low and deliberate. Margaret trusted me. And today, she was proven right. For a moment, silence reigned. Every eye turned toward me, not as the man they had tried to erase, not as a relic of the past, but as the executor the law had now recognized. I let the words settle, knowing the weight they carried. My mind drifted unbidden to the memory of Margaret on that last quiet evening. Her hand slipping a small key into Richard's palm, her whisper steady, despite the weakness in her body. "When the time comes, give this to Edward. He will know what to do." That single gesture had brought us here. The judge's ruling was final, the gavel's echo still alive in the chamber. But outside these walls, another battle awaited the court of public opinion, and it was time to face it head on. Reporters flooded the courthouse steps, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. I stood firm, Richard and Evelyn by my side. Olivia lingered in the shadows behind me, her once proud shoulders hunched Daniel, whispering frantically to her, his own composure cracking. I cleared my throat, and the crowd hushed. "The truth has been revealed," I said. The will Margaret left was not a matter of speculation. It was fact. For those who doubted, justice has spoken. The press surged with questions, but I pressed on. Private equity firms that sought to exploit this chaos will find no deal here. The bridge loan extended on false pretenses will be recalled in full, and those who sought to profit from fraud will answer for it. Gasps followed the journalists, scribbling furiously. Already the news tickers would be burning. Olivia Munro's empire collapses. Fraud investigation looms for husband Daniel Price. Behind me, I could hear Olivia's breathing, shallow, jagged. Her empire of borrowed power had crumbled in a single morning. The PE group had withdrawn the memorandum, her creditors circling like sharks. Daniel's bar license was now under formal review. Investigators had already opened files, each page a nail in his professional coffin. I, however, stood in the open air, unburdened. The estate was intact, my authority as executor affirmed. $68 million of legacy, not for vanity, not for spectacle, but for stewardship, for continuity, for what Margaret had intended. Richard leaned closer, whispering just enough for me to hear, "It's done. They can't touch you now." I gave a small nod, then turned back to the sea of cameras. My words rang steady, a verdict beyond the courtroom. Justice may arrive late, but it always arrives. The crowd erupted, reporters shouting, bulbs flashing. Olivia sank into her chair on the courthouse steps, eyes glassy, as if the world had dissolved beneath her. Daniel's face was ashen, his phone buzzing relentlessly with calls he dared not answer. I descended the steps slowly, every flash of the camera, capturing not the broken man they had tried to paint me as, but the truth. Richard and Evelyn flanked me, the quiet proof that loyalty and truth outlast deception. At the edge of the swarm, I paused. The shutters clicked in rapid fire, white light flooding my vision. I tilted my face skyward, the weight lifting at last. Beneath my breath, only I could hear it. "You can rest now, Margaret." The crowd roared, the cameras flared, but in that instant none of it mattered. The game was over. The board was cleared, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt peace. Justice wasn't handed to me. It was fought for piece by piece until the truth stood clear. Margaret's trust carried me through the fire, and in the end, her faith was my strongest weapon. I've learned that lies may shine for a moment, but they always burn out in the light of truth. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow.